Hey y'all, my name is Adina Barnett Miller, but I'm known to my students as Mrs. B. I've been passionate about West Virginia history for as long as I can remember, but my mom would tell you it all started when I was 3 years old and she bought me a West Virginia counties puzzle at Gino's Pizza. I've taught history in Ripley, West Virginia for over 20 years now, and I'm an adjunct professor who teaches college West Virginia history to high school students. Please join me for West Virginia History with Mrs. B, a field trip across the Mountain State to walk in the footsteps of those who came before us.
Hey y'all, it's West Virginia History with Mrs. B and your substitute teacher, guest lecturer, whatever you want to call me, Dave here with you for this episode of West Virginia History with Mrs. B. You may have seen back around Christmas, we put out a video about the Marshall plane crash and how that devastated Marshall University back in 1970. 75 people lost their lives in that plane crash. And today we're going to take a look at one of those 75 who perished that day, a man who is known as probably one of the greatest athletes to ever come out of Harrison County and has just a remarkable legacy. And we're going to talk about Frank Paul Loria. Frank Loria was born on January 6th, 1947, and he went here to Clarksburg Notre Dame High School, where he was a three-sport athlete here at the school. Probably most known for, well, football. The coaches and his teammates have all said when it came to playing offense and being a running back, he was quick and shifty, just exactly what you would want out of a running back. As a defensive back, he loved to hit, and that's exactly what he did. And he was a great athlete here for Clarksburg Notre Dame High School, so good it led him to get a scholarship to go play down at Virginia Polytechnic Institute, now known as Virginia Tech, down in Blacksburg, Virginia. There he teamed up with a guy by the name of Frank Beamer. We'll talk more about him later on. But he and Beamer put up a great tandem in that Virginia Tech backfield. Loria played in all 31 games. He was eligible to play for the Hokies. And some of the highlights of Frank Loria's career. In 1966, a key sack in a win over Kentucky. He had an 80-yard punt return and a key fourth down tackle in the fourth quarter against Florida State. He had a critical interception in the fourth quarter to preserve a win over William and Mary. And in 1967, he had a 95-yard punt return for a touchdown in a game against the University of Miami. That today is still the longest punt return in Virginia Tech history. He was also an All-American from the Associated Press in 1966 and a consensus All-American in 1967. So when you say Frank Loria, one of the most decorated athletes to come out of Harrison County and Clarksburg Notre Dame High School, they really mean it. The stats back it up. So, and just to think that this building here, Clarksburg Notre Dame High School, we look up here, the school was built here, this location built in 1954. They dedicated it. Obviously, Frank Loria roamed these halls at one point.
And walk through these doors.
And these doors as well. And to think that a great career as an athlete, as short as it was, it all started here at Clarksburg Notre Dame High School. So, and just take a moment to recognize just the beauty and the architecture of this building, because one other thing I've come to discover about Frank Loria is he was a very proud Catholic man for as young as he was. He was very, very serious about his faith. And I think coming here to Clarksburg Notre Dame High School really cemented that into him and his legacy as a man. So, unfortunately, the story turns tragic for Frank Loria because he joins the Marshall coaching staff in 1969 and, of course, is ultimately killed in the plane crash November 14th of 1970. And we're going to move on now to another location where we talk about Frank Loria and where his final resting place is. So we have now moved to the Holy Cross Cemetery here in Clarksburg, where we have found Frank Loria's final resting place. As we know, in the 75 that were killed in the Martian plane crash, there were 6 that were just beyond recognition in the crash. They were all buried there at Spring Hill Cemetery, and of course you can watch that video to learn more about that. But Frank Loria was identified, and he was brought back here to Clarksburg, where he was buried at the Holy Cross Cemetery. And as I mentioned, over at Notre Dame High School, Frank Loria's faith was very, very important to him, as we see depicted on this headstone here. The cross, look at his grave marker here. Go to 1947 to 1970, of course. That depiction of Christ there on the marker to remember him, again, just shows the man of faith. And Frank Loria, when he passed away, left behind his wife Phyllis, who also attended Notre Dame High School. They had 2 young daughters, Julie and Vicky, and Phyllis was pregnant about 8 months along with their son Frank Jr. And Frank Jr. Grew up without his father, but still has had made every effort to get out there to remember his father. Among some of the legacy of Frank Loria is every year they have the Frank Loria dinner, where they honor the first team, all Harrison County football players. Some of the notable speakers that have appeared at that over the years: Frank Beamer, Don Nealon, Bob Huggins. Loria Jr. also makes an appearance every year as well with that. And they also give out the Frank Loria Award, which is dedicated to the most outstanding player of Harrison County schools for football as well. So the man's life, the man's legacy, still a big part of culture here in Harrison County when it comes to high school football here. And we have one more place to take you here in Harrison County, where the life and legacy of Frank Loria lives on. All right, so the last place we've brought you to is Clarksburg City Park, which is a little tricky. It's actually in the community of Notre here in Harrison County, and we are at Frank Loria Memorial Field, one of the last legacies here of Frank Loria. This is a baseball facility that obviously we'd show you, but there's a game going on right now, and we can't
we'll peek in.
But nonetheless, Frank Loria, who was one of the most gifted athletes here in Harrison County, with this bit of legacy left for him with the name of this field. Obviously, it's used for baseball tournaments like are going on here. This has served sometimes as the home for the baseball team of Salem University. The Tigers play here every once in a while. I can remember when I was a student at West Virginia State, they would come up here to play Salem. I don't know if they have a field back in the western part of the county where the university is now, but they would play their games here as well. And just a couple other things about Frank Loria to remember. In 1982, he was inducted into the Virginia Tech Sports Hall of Fame, 1984 for the Virginia Sports Hall of Fame, and December the 7th, 1999, he, along with his college football coach, Jerry Claiborne, were inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame. And of course, probably the greatest of all memories for him, his number 10 jersey that he wore at Virginia Tech is currently retired. So nobody else in the history of Virginia Tech football is going to wear that number. And remember when I said that he was a teammate of Frank Beamer? Well, Beamer would go on to be a legendary coach there for the Hokies in Blacksburg for well over 30 years. And he said one day, had Frank Loria not died in that plane crash, he very well could have been the coach of football for Virginia Tech, and Beamer would have just been an assistant. That's how remarkable this man was. When he was at Notre Dame High School, he was like, as the coaches put it, he he was a coach on the field with his ability in how he played the game, both offensively and defensively. So I hope we have done right by Loria and his family and his surviving members and the folks of Harrison County by trying to remember the life and legacy of one of the most incredible athletes, I think, not just from Harrison County, but the entire state of West Virginia.
Right.
And of course, folks, Frank Loria, of course, one of the 75 that died in the Marshall plane crash. I think he's probably got one of the most interesting stories behind him, and I think probably one of the most forgotten of the 75 from that plane crash. He was one of 3 coaches on that Marshall staff from the state of West Virginia. Of course, Rick Tolley being from Wyoming County, and Shorty Moss, who was from Huntington himself. So if you get the opportunity, pay your respects to Frank Loria. The cemetery, Holy Cross Cemetery there in Clarksburg, Frank Loria Field here, Memorial Field here in Notre. And again, thank you all so very much for joining us on this little expedition here in Harrison County. We remember those 75 from Marshall University in 1970, and among those 75, we remember Frank Loria.
Thanks, y'all, for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to West Virginia History with Mrs. B on both Facebook and YouTube. Okay, we're sneaking a peek at Frank Loria Field. They are in the middle of the game, so we didn't want to intrude, but I wanted to give you a view of this field. It is gorgeous.
And I want to note, if you look out at the wall there in left center field, the green S is there for Salem.
Oh, yep, I see those. And then it's got Salem 2023 something champs. So, what a beautiful space.